Hey everybody, it's Mike Sullivan with Born to Shine. Today we have a great guest. His name is Dr. Patrick Keeley, and he is a fellow Irishman like myself. And this is so great. Thank you, Pat, for carving out some time with us today. Because superintendents, I know you're in San Diego and you have a lot going on. So thanks for carving out some time for us today.
Sure, appreciate being on.
And what was your journey like, Pat, to become the superintendent? A lot of people looking up to you for your leadership, your guidance, and your wisdom. What was your journey like?
Well, I think primarily, you get into teaching because you want to be a teacher. And they always ask at the beginning of a career, what's your educational philosophy? What's your why? And kind of questions like that get asked a lot. And, with the lens of a lot of years behind me now, I always think, your lens or your why changes along the
Mm,
way. But
mm,
I got into teaching because for me overall, I enjoyed the school, the social part of school, especially as a kid. So I liked being around school, and it's like at first I was like thinking, one of the most impactful people for me was my basketball coach, and he was a history teacher, and he was an impactful person in my life. And so I was like, I want to be a basketball coach, and I want to teach history, and I want to do all those things, and I did, and I got to do all of that. Um, and along the way, I was doing student activities and running the student activities program at a couple of different high schools. Um, and then I had someone, a principal kind of call me in and go, "Hey, you don't have your master's degree. Go get your master's degree, get your admin credential." And first thing was, I don't want to be an administrator. I don't want to do that. Is you need your master's degree. You need to get over on the pay scale. And then as I did it, I was like, hey, I could do this job. I see these things. And so, the next year after I finished, he hired me as his vice principal. And then a few years later, I'd been transferred to a different school, and really just kind of this opportunity had happened, where I was the last person standing on an admin team. A couple of people, somebody had an illness, a couple other people had been transferred, and all of a sudden I found myself, on the phone with the superintendent. I was a vice principal, and him just saying, hey, you're in charge of day-to-day operations till we figure out the next move. And so for the rest of a summer, I, kind of ran the school. And I was relatively young in terms of high school principaling. I was 36 at the time. And so became a high school principal, went through the process. They tried to, reinstate and bring back the former principal. And then it was, no, we want to run a process. And so then I got selected and eventually made my way back out to where I am now. I was in a larger school district, but in Mountain Empire, the principal job came open, and I was ready for a change. This is about 11 years ago. I was ready for a change. It was just something different, and that something different happened to be the high school I went to.
mm,
And so to be in a position to go be the principal of your own high school is a super unique
mm.
thing. It's like not something that everybody gets to do. And I don't know that everybody wants to do that. Even if you do become a principal, I don't know that that's something you think about. For some people, probably. Um, and then during that time, while I was the high school principal, my superintendent, she, then pushed me towards getting my doctorate. And again, it's like one of those things that somebody else is seeing something in you, but you're like, I got kids, I got, a job and blah, blah, blah. Do I want to go back to school? Finish that. And once I was done with that, then she was like, I'm going to retire. And she goes, this is a great opportunity for you to, apply for the superintendency. And so at that point, was named superintendent actually in the middle of COVID. The first superintendent to take over a district in San Diego County during COVID. So that was fun.
Hmm.
But really the journey, when I think about it, and this was part of when I was writing my dissertation. I went back to my overall journey as a learner and as a student first. Um, and it really was about other people seeing leadership potential in me.
Mm,
And what did that do for me? What
mm,
did that do? And so really my first part of exploring that was, what can a principal do? What can an educator do to identify leadership qualities? What are they doing when they identify leadership qualities in young people? And really, a lot of my interest came in that at one point I worked at a continuation school, and what I saw there, for, there's about 200 to 300 students there, and a large chunk were on probation and other things. But what I saw was a lot of untapped leadership potential. I saw a lot of kids who thought as individuals and were looking for their own path. And so this was before I came to Mount Empire, but I always thought about it thinking, the amount of kids that are in alternative programs because they weren't necessarily willing to conform, or maybe not able to for a variety of reasons. I thought, what are we doing in schools to foster leadership ability? Because in the end, you need to be able to, at least at a bare minimum as a person, lead yourself
mm,
at the very minimum, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to go be the club president and the team captain or the ASB person or anything else. But how are you, in these situations where you are having to make choices for yourself and possibly for others? At some point, you might be in a relationship, you might have a family. There's a variety of things where you find yourself needing to make choices in life, and how are you reflective about that, and all of those things. So that was kind of my exploration into that concept, and so when I reflect on my trajectory, other people saw me as, as a way maybe I didn't see myself all the time.
mm.
And so I try to think like that in my own role now. Like, how am I identifying those things with our staff, and providing opportunity and encouragement and the gentle push along the way. Um, that's kind of my journey to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so cool, Pat, that all those people were breathing life into you and seeing things in you that they were encouraging you and now you're encouraging others. So that's really cool. And when you were K-12, Pat, was there anything that you struggled with? For me, I was bullied a lot, and had a lot of anxiety and depression and ADD and OCD. It was really kind of it was a tough time for me. Was there anything when you were K-12 that you struggled with?
Um, mostly in the school space. I would say, there's probably two things. One, as a young man, as a high school kid, I was super skinny. I remember going to a doctor and trying to figure out, how do I gain weight?
Mm,
With really, honestly, you can do some things, but sometimes your metabolism as a kid, and every kid is going through something in their hormonal development in adolescence. So that was difficult, trying to be a student athlete, trying to be a basketball player, and
mm,
not being able to push past 140 pounds
mm,
at times, and having at one point an older kid that just called me malnu all the time,
mm,
and
mm,
it's kind of bygones. It's 30 plus years ago. It's like,
mhm.
it doesn't, like, something, it's not something like now that I am mad at or anything like that, but at the time it was like, gosh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
um, I'd say the other thing is, behaviorally, I had my challenges. I was, pretty ADD, youngest in my family, so also had to be pretty quick-witted,
Mm,
and that ran me into some trouble in school, especially. Like, hey, this guy's smart, and this kid can do this and this, and he's not, you know. he's not achieving where he needs to be, or he won't stop talking in class, and it was kind of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I look back on it and it's like I don't know that I did a ton of homework in high
Mm-hmm.
school, and instead of being a kid that probably could have been, close to a 4.0 or whatever, I was a kid that was skimming by at about a 2.2 GPA because it was like, I don't need your homework. I can do the test and I can pass the test and I would move on with my life. And um, so that caused some anxiousness, or some maybe more anxiousness for my mom and dad. But then I think about being talkative in class, and how my behaviors were handled versus how maybe I handled behaviors as a teacher. And I can think of uh, my geometry class, and not really. I was really great in algebra. I got it, and it was perfect. And then like got into geometry, and it was like, meh, I don't really care for this. And I wasn't really engaged. And so if you're a student who's not engaged and it's not a high interest subject,
Right.
you're going to find a way to engage yourself in other things. And so eventually I got kind of separated from the class, and I had a desk over in the corner by myself. So the class was over here and my desk was back in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, a friend of mine was also in the same boat in the next class, and so she sat in that desk, and I uh, I would write notes to her during my geometry class and stuff them under the desk, and then she would read them and reply, and we had kind of an ongoing note most of our sophomore year. But when I think back on it, there wasn't at the time, in the mid '80s, much of a focus on the students, even as people, I think, to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was much more about this is the content, you need to learn it. And there wasn't anything about how do you make your content more engaging. It wasn't any of that. Now, some teachers did, naturally, they tried and they did that, but I don't know that the education world was there.
Mm.
Um, and so, I look back at that and I think about, um, there was times in my class, I think the whole time I was a teacher, I might have written like 5 discipline referrals. And usually those were like a big safety issue in class. Like I remember, a kid smacked another kid's binder
Mm.
as they were looking at it. And the binder clip hit that kid's nose and cut their nose. That's got to be something, right? You got to send them for that.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you're gonna talk in class. Hey, let's go outside for a second. Let's reset you. Let's do that. And so I think it did help me appreciate, kind of maybe the goofball kid.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall sitting at lunch with a teacher one time when I was in the classroom, and we had a common student, and this teacher just could not
Mm.
deal with him. And I was like, I love having that kid in class because they ask the most oddball questions,
Mm.
and it livens up the class, for other reasons. And it makes other kids kind of feel good too,
Mm.
because then we can have a light moment. We had some levity in class for a minute. And so I really enjoyed that. I liked to engage in that. And so I think I didn't know at the time when I was 15 that it was probably career training, but
Mm.
that's, kind of the message I like to send to people as well. We don't know when we're teaching all the
Right.
time, right?
Right.
Everything we do teaches.
Mm.
Everything we do, from how we greet the kids in the morning to, how our classroom is set up, to how we react to adversity, to our actual lessons and how we lay them out,
Yeah,
you
amen.
know.
Modeling.
So,
You're
yeah,
modeling.
everything we do teaches. So,
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Love that. Thank you for sharing that, Pat. That's really
sure,
cool.
sure.
Oh, and by the way, your friend that shared the desk is getting her PhD and she's an assistant superintendent now. So,
Yeah,
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 very cool. Okay. So just wanted to throw that in. And
yeah, yeah.
right,
She was also getting the same career training as I was, I guess.
absolutely, absolutely. And then, if to dream big, if we had a magic wand and we could bring anything into your school to support your students, your staff, the parents, with their emotional well-being, their mental health, what would that look like in addition to Maybe and school counselors are amazing and so needed. Same with psychologists, they're incredible. How would you add or build the team? And maybe is there something you've noticed that has been working well within your school district?
Um, I think primarily, and yeah, there are a lot of supports, right?
Right.
But it's all kind of from the same avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what's the playbook?
Mm.
And so how is it that we create more avenues for wellness and mental, sticking within mental wellness, it isn't just here's I guess I think there's a lot of people that think it's you have a problem, you need to fix your problem. Um, so if you have depression, you must go see a counselor or you must be medicated. Um, but it's a multifaceted problem. Yes, for some people, depression could be situational, could be seasonal, could be a true medical like deep issue, right? There's a lot of different ways to look at it. But I think allowing for schools to become more creative, create more time within the day, I think would be helpful. I mean, you have these very strict artificial barriers for traditional public schools, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the thing that I always kind of go back to is time. What kind of time do people need? Some people require a lot of time on certain things, and some people do not. Our teachers need time.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need, maybe, thinking of teacher wellness for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know that 30 straight hours of student contact time is the best way for a teacher to always get better at their work or to have better career satisfaction. That's not to say that the teachers do not love their kids, because it is very rare that I have met someone in my career that isn't in education for the right reasons. You know,
That's
um,
great. Yeah.
nobody's getting up saying, "Let me really think about how to mess something up today." Nobody's
Yeah.
doing that. We're all human,
Yeah.
and human beings can make mistakes, and all do at
Mm-hmm.
times, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's aside from everything. I think finding creative ways to add more creativity, first of all, to schools. Um, I if you're familiar with, think it's the original TED Talk and Ken Robinson talking about
Mm-hmm.
and using a study about someone who wasn't engaged in school, and it was a girl, and then they took her to dance class, and someone saying, "There's nothing wrong with her. She's just a dancer." Right?
Mm-hmm.
Some, kids all learn differently, and I think we need to create more opportunities for avenues for learning. And I think, we've allowed that for charter schools in a way, right? We've
Right.
allowed for charter schools to create flexibility, but then we say, this works for charter schools, but traditional public schools, you must sit over in this box. And then we go, why doesn't it work?
Right.
Right.
Well
And I
said.
think back to COVID, COVID was our opportunity to change everything. It was our opportunity for public schools to add creativity, to add flexible scheduling, to add all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, the second we could open up schools, it was let's put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And a bunch of lawmakers who don't know school said, put school back together how we used to see it.
Right.
When we're not preparing kids for jobs that even exist at this point.
Right.
Right? So
A hundred
what
percent.
ways can we be more creative with our school day? I'll use, like, for example, my daughter for an example. During COVID, she was at the beginning of COVID, she was a sophomore in high school. She was on that honors AP track of students. And as school returned, and at first it was you're going to go 1 day a week, then it was 2 days a week, and then it was like that, right? She maintained her academic levels. She did great. But then it was like, okay, we got to get everything back together. And she had to go 5 days a week again. And I'm thinking, because she has two parents who both work in the education industry, who are, focused and on, and have stability, she was even like, our jobs were this, same schedule. So not one of us wasn't working, graveyard shifts or anything else. We
Hmm.
could make ends meet. A lot of people couldn't, especially during that time.
Right.
And I recall for our daughter, we were doing a physics experiment at home during COVID.
Mm.
And she had to do this part, but it took more than one person to kind of set it up. And then
Mm.
she also had to have it on video.
Mm.
So there was no evidence of cheating.
Right.
So basically, it was my wife and I and our daughter doing this. And our daughter at 15 says, well, what happens if somebody's parents can't help them? Right. So
Right.
so the 15-year-old was insightful enough to know that.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's like I look back at, where she was when we returned to school for 5 days a week. She could have been a kid that went 2 days a week,
Mm.
and got her curriculum and worked at home because she could manage the at home work. Why can't a kid that can do that stay in a traditional public school? And if you think about it, then, the kids that maybe needed more, maybe they were there 3, 4, 5 days a week, but during some of that time, there were only kids that needed the extra additional supports,
Mm.
and then the teachers could focus on smaller groups. There's different ways, and that was just one. That's just one thought, right? We in our traditional public schools have a lot of artificial barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it is up to each individual school district to figure out their creativity, which is fine. Local control and local input is all great. But at the state level, I don't know. Like, for example, we're a smaller school district, not in size. We're 660 square miles, but we have 1,730 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we're small schools everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're part of the Small School District Association for the state of California, and I was at um, a workshop or there was a state senator who was speaking to the group, and then he took questions
Mm.
about ways to improve things. And so I asked a question about 4 day school weeks. For the last part of COVID, we were on a 4 day school week, and Mondays were independent study, and teachers could work and plan the week and everything else. And he came back at, well, what would you do? Blah, 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 blah. And, this is where sometimes my mouth will get me in trouble. But I just said, why don't you let the people that work in schools figure that out?
Mm.
Stop trying to figure everything out for us. Your job necessarily as a lawmaker or even as a leader is to not be always into solutionitis. You're not supposed to, you're a lawmaker. Give me a law to let me allow to work within it, right? It's just like schools, right? Let's give kids parameters, but allow them the autonomy to figure out their learning and allow them those plans. So I think, I've probably talked in a huge circle around what's my magic bullet. I don't think it's a magic bullet other than let schools have their autonomy to figure some of these things out. Let us prove what's working and what's not. And if we say that, one set of schools can operate on these things and we, in charters and do non-classroom based or hybrid models, but we won't let traditional public schools, then how, we're talking apples and oranges now,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so, schools should be these places where creativity is celebrated, where creativity and how we're operating is celebrated, and that we can figure out how to provide more time to people, even if it is within that same period of time, even if
Amen.
it is in that 7 hour school day. Let me figure out that maybe all of our teachers don't need to be 30 hours straight with kids because when are they going to when are they going to have those reflective practices? When are they going to be able to, plan, deeper lessons or learn new techniques or whatever? I mean, we have AI running through the place right now, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of education.
Mm.
And it's only the people that are going to give up a ton of time in the evenings that are really going to hone in on it. And
Right.
what sacrifice is that?
Right. Huge
If you
amount
go
of time.
home, and if you go home and you're on your computer for another 5 hours while
Mm,
you're
mm,
ignoring your
mm,
children,
mm. Yeah.
now you're not square with your family, right?
Right.
Now you don't
Right
have a
there.
focus on your family, and then then there's a life satisfaction issue as well. So anyway, I can go down the rabbit hole forever philosophically with you on it if you want, but
No, that was great. That was great, and totally agree. The public school, charter schools, and the hybrids, and yeah. So that, and it kind of dovetails beautifully, Pat, into if someone were watching this, a student perhaps, or a mom or dad, or a superintendent or a teacher, anyone, what would you say to encourage him or her?
um, well, encourage in a broad way. Um, I try to reinforce this with people and live it and model it. Um, that the focus in your life should be the people in your life.
Mm,
And, so when I share with people, like, when I think about my stresses in life,
mhm,
my stress in life is tied to work. It
mm.
is not tied to anything outside of work. I mean, I suppose I could, I could watch the news all day and like drive myself batty,
Sure, sure.
but, but like when I think about like my relationships,
Mhm,
outside of school. I put my effort in. I try my best to make sure. And I always tell people, like, if you're square out there, like if you've got everything going on out there, whatever your family is, whatever you may choose, for some people, they've come from difficult family situations and they don't want to go back to that. So they choose a different path in their
mm,
family. And I hear the term family,
mm,
like the
mm, mm.
friends, family,
Right,
whatever that may be, whatever and whoever those people are,
right.
make sure that that part of your life is really, really solid
Hmm.
because then the other stresses in life, whether it's school, whether it's work, they're not, they are just that. They're tied to that. But that's not all of who you are, right?
Right,
And so if those things outside of work are not, you know, great, it's going to impact the other side of your life, whether it's school or whether it's work or whatever it might be, or your health, your mental health, your physical health,
right.
right? So I guess for me, when I think you called it like, where's your, kind of like, where's your heart at? My
Hmm.
heart is at, you know, focus on those parts of your life and the other parts become easier to manage or become easier, period. And at least my philosophical way of looking at it. That's where I'm at, and might just be a function of being in my 50s.
No, no, it's great. Relationships are so critical and paramount. We need people to lean on when times are tough. And to encourage those when they're going through something tough. Those relationships are so powerful. So, Dr. Keeley, thank you so much for sharing your heart, your time, your wisdom, and just really appreciate you being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to be on.